or afternoon, I guess now. This is my first flip classroom video that I've ever made, so bear with me. It's gonna be corny. It's not gonna be great, but just like this time out of school, we're gonna get through it. So on Thursday, or not Thursday, on Monday, we had continued to look at into our journey into Islamic art. We looked at mosques. We looked at the five pillars of Islam. We looked at pilgrimage centers such as Dome of the Rock. We looked at the Kaaba. So now we're going to take a look at some Islamic luxury art. Feel free to pause this video at any point to take notes. I'm going to try to run this as I would during class, posing some questions to you that you can think about to yourself. But again, it's up to you if you want to pause or not, or you just kind of go through and kind of hear the information, see the information, and then if you have any questions, feel free to post them. Most of these images are not in the notes that I provided you because they were added to the AP Art History curriculum to the 250 after this note packet was made. So let's start. So we're going to begin our journey in the modern day country of Uzbekistan, taking a look at a textile called Confronting Lions and Palm Tree. So the only reason I'm showing you this is that it's relatively one of the oldest textiles that we have from the Islamic civilization. It is using a medium of art that is coming from China, so it shows trade. It is made out of silk. We've seen that before in our Asian art unit. But the most important aspect of this is the idea that we see imagery and zoomorphic imagery in non-religious pieces. So again, animals were common in secular areas. We saw that in the Alhambra, the fountain that we looked at yesterday. Don't forget the Alhambra is essentially a palace for the sultans ruling that part of Spain during the Islamic rule of that part of Europe. So here we have just, again, another example of an image that is not in the 250, but a secular image. It's called the ewer in the form of a bird. It has an engraved decoration, and we kind of, yes, it's a bird, but we still see that common Islamic calligraphy going around the neck. We see the repetitious patterns of the feathers going down from the bottom all the way to the top. And you also see some decorative starburst patterns. So again, at this point, this is made in 796 CE, and Islam, just like we saw with Christian art, the accepted imagery and canon of Egyptian art is beginning to be fully formulated. So this is a plaque made out of ivory, which again is coming from animal tusk or elephant tusk, and it's one of the very few pieces of art that you actually see human imagery. So again, this is from the 10th, 11th century, so we're around the year 1000, and if you look at it, it's that idea of the horror vacui with the fear of open space. We have these arabesque interlacing leaf patterns that we saw in early Middle Age art, all the way in Ireland and England, and we're seeing that also used here in a civilization and culture that would not have had any impact or contact with one another. Now, this is an image that is in your note card set. This is a folio from the Quran, and it is one of the oldest recorded pages of any Quran. So don't forget, that is Islamic calligraphy. It's Arabic. And up into the 14th and 15th centuries, most calligraphers remained anonymous because they thought that they were doing God's work. That also is not too different than the monks that were creating the illuminated manuscripts of Bibles in those scriptoriums and monasteries where the monks were isolated, and they would take them, 5 to 6 years to create one specific Bible. So we here have this great clarity of the text, and again, it's important because several readers read these books at once, and some at a great distance. So that's why the print's so bold, and it's also so large. Here we have, again, just another view of this calligraphy script. If you open up this PowerPoint, you can see that there is a 7-minute video on Arabic and Ottoman and Persian calligraphy. That's all coming from the Khan Academy. If you'd like to pause and take a look at that, you can actually really just copy and paste that title up there, and it should take you right to the video on Khan Academy. Now, also, we're moving on to another piece. This is called the Pyx of Al Mugria from 968. This is made out of ivory. One of the things that should jump right out to you. First off, material, a luxury material, expensive material. And then we also have that horror vacui, that fear of open space, which is common amongst a lot of Islamic imagery that we've looked at. And again, that has gone back so far to Roman imagery. We've seen that. And we have that interlacing of vegetative patterns. We've got birds, we've got animals, we've got humans on horseback. So, again, very rare. And the function of this piece, a pyx, was a container for expensive aromatics, so essentially incense. We have those, again, geometric and vegetal form motifs covering the entire thing. And there's 8 medallion scenes showing kind of various activities of the royal court. There's hunting, falconry. Falconry is the idea of literally training a falcon and kind of having it tethered to this leather leash that would be on one of its talons. We have sports and we have musicians. And this was made in Islamic Spain. So this could be something found if you were a person living in, Granada, Spain, or if you were living in the Alhambra, which was that palace. This might be something you have on a desk in your bedroom chamber. So let's continue, and we are going to move now to an area of the modern day Middle East called Ardabil. And in Ardabil, this is another piece of Islamic art that's in your note card set. This is the Ardabil carpet. And this was from a funerary mosque, so a mosque that was dedicated to funerary rites. And what you have here is a massive, massive carpet. If you look, it's 36 feet by 17 feet. And it is called, and the medium of the work is knotted pile, all right, and silk. And also there would have been wool. And it would have been very, very soft, which is where the silk comes in. And it's one of the chief exports and chief textiles made in this Islamic era of art. And it is meant to mimic, if you look at the circular area, the dome of the Marab dome of an Islamic mosque. And we talked about what the Marab domes were in our last class. And the Marab was that semicircular niche that was in the Qibla wall, so that when Muslims went down to pray, that's the wall that faced Mecca, and they let them know that that's the wall that faced Mecca. So in the center of this carpet, you have this very ornate geometric pattern. Almost looks like tessellations, and then also we have kind of arabesques with the vegetal patterns going around the dome itself, but all meant to mimic that Marab dome. And then on either end, or on the north and south end of the carpet, you have these things that are meant to mimic the lamps that would have hung inside of an Islamic mosque. And if you come to the corners, these look like those stalactites that were inside of the Alhambra. And again, a typical architectural feature of mosques coming from this time period. And again, we're in about the year 1540, and Ardabil is a city in Iran. So massive carpet would have been used for a funeral mosque or funerary mosque. 25 million knots. So if you think of your carpet and you're, if you're in a room right now that has a carpet, all those little pieces that stick up from the matting that holds the fabric together, all of them are considered knots. So there's 25 million. Gives you an idea of how big it is. We have the mosque lamps. And then I didn't bring this up, but those the designs that are going around the dome are all meant to symbolize lotus blossoms. Okay, and again, carpets were primarily used as places for people to sit and then kneel. So we're going to kind of go through this one relatively quickly. This is the Muhammad Al Zain Basin, also known as the Baptistery of St. Louis. So what we have here is what we would have considered a water basin made out of metal. We have brass inlaid with gold and silver. We know that it's important because the artist signs it 6 times. Its original use would have been washing hands and feet at official ceremonies. Now, one of the things that we didn't really talk about when we started to talk about mosques was that when someone went into a mosque, you cleansed yourself. You cleansed your feet, cleansed your face, cleansed your hands, all to show your honor and how you were almost, cleansing not just your physical self to honor God, but you would go inside to cleanse your soul as well. So that's what this was used for. But it has going around the basin itself. We've got some hunting scenes. There's some battle scenes. Mamluk is the name of the civilization, the Islamic Empire that created this. So we have Mamluk hunters and fighting their Mongol enemies. All right, remember Mongols coming from Asia. And at the bottom of the bowl, which we see here, it's kind of told in registers. The bottom here is decorated with fish, eels, crabs, frogs, and crocodiles. So again, don't forget at any point hit pause and take notes on these as you go through them. We're going to skip through this mosque because it's not actually in the 250. So we're going to go through this. So now we're actually, let me go back here real quick. We are going to move to India. We've looked at some art from India already. We looked at the artable carpet. And now we're going to go to the Great Mosque of Isfahan. So the Great Mosque of Isfahan has a couple similar architectural features, but there's one that is specifically new to this mosque, and the mosque being created in Islam. The first thing I want to talk about is that this mosque, first off, is extremely beautiful. It is covered in these tiles that cover the minarets and the mihrab dome, and really all areas of the mosque itself. And it's covered in a lot of blue. But it is known for this architectural feature called an iwan. So an iwan is really just this large, squared kind of entranceway that has a pointed kind of arch in the middle, and it is a decorative architectural feature. It doesn't really serve any architectural purpose, and the Great Mosque of Isfahan has 4 of these, and the largest Iwan is where the Qibla wall is, and it's also where the Mihrab dome is. So this was actually it took a long time to create this mosque. It took about 600 years for it to be built, and when we start to look through some of the images, you'll see why, because of how ornate it is. So it's very large. It's a large mosque complex. It has a madrasa as part of it, and again, a madrasa is just another name for an Islamic school where you could learn about the faith. Catholics have CCD or Catholic school. Other Christian denominations have Sunday school. Jewish groups have Hebrew school. So this was no different, all right? Teaching from a young age the tenets of your faith is nothing new. And a madrasa is just another name for an Islamic school. And if you go down below and you copy and paste or look any of these links up at the bottom, we have, they will take you to kind of more in-depth videos from the Khan Academy. Here you see the use, again, of our similar Islamic architecture. We have the calligraphy going around the entranceway of the large Iwan. We have these arabesques and then the incorporation of tessellations. We have the stalactite design here that was common in the Alhambra when we saw that in the Islamic section of Granada in Spain and the Great Mosque of Cordoba. So again, these features being seen and incorporated. That is the Mihrab dome right there. Very bright, very blue. And again, kind of meant to mimic the idea of the nighttime sky and this beauty that's almost meant to keep you in a trance-like feeling so that you can focus on prayer. And again, just going through some of these tiled images, very ornate, very large, almost awe-inspiring. And the only thing I would say that we could kind of connect this to is the idea of this awe-inspiring overwhelming imagery is almost like what we will see when we get to Romanesque and Gothic art with stained glass. The stained glass is meant to be almost awe-inspiring, as is this. And again, just that extensive use of blue. Blue is still an expensive color. Coming from, though, luckily, this part of Iran, that's where you get that cobalt, right? And this is tiled, so it's kind of, created just like using ceramic clay and then fired. This is the large pool and forecourt outside of the Great Mosque of Isfahan. Now, it's really known also, besides the domes and its tile work, it's known for its mihrab. So this mihrab is actually in the madrasa. So the madrasa is the school section of this mosque. And for those people that were in the madrasa learning, there would be various times of the day where they would have to come down and pray. And this was inside of the school section. And again, this is just an example of a semicircular niche in what a mihrab would look like, which would be in the Qibla wall of this madrasa. And it also highlights some of the mosaic ceramic techniques. This was known as quadra seca, all right, and it shows that perfect aesthetic union between Islamic calligraphy and that ornamentation. This was known as the golden age of kind of Islamic art inside of modern day Iran. This is the winter prayer hall, an example of quadra seca, which are where the tiles are kind of polychromatic and can be more easily bear complex geometric patterns in Arabic script. Color in the quadra seca, though, is not as bright and vibrant. And now we're going to head to Islamic art created during the Ottoman Empire. So don't forget, the Ottoman Empire rises up in the 1400s. They are the ones that will overthrow the Byzantine Empire. The Byzantine Empire had been around for about 1,000 years at this point, and the Ottomans will rule from the 1400s all the way up until the end of World War I, where their empire will be broken apart because they will be on the losing side of World War I. So if you look into the back there, that is something that you should know, or at least it looks like it is. So that building in the background looks a whole lot like the Hagia Sophia, which was that church built in the 600s under the Emperor Justinian, who was a Christian leader of the Byzantine Empire. But this is not the Hagia Sophia. It is known as the Blue Mosque, or the Mosque of Selim II, and it's actually bigger than the Hagia Sophia. So it was meant to kind of show the triumph of Islam over Christianity in the Islamic Empire. So it is in Turkey. The purpose of those minarets, again, are for call to prayer. And here you have the overall plan of this mosque. It has a madrasa, it has a cemetery area, so kind of more multi-purpose than some of the other mosques that we have seen before, as well as definitely more multi-purpose than the Hagia Sophia. This is the interior. If you look, we have these arches, which we have not only just one set of arches, but two set of arches, which go back to the Great Mosque of Cordoba that we saw in Spain. And if you look at the arches themselves, they have that alternating color. And if you think back, where do we see that color from? That alternating color that goes back to an inspiration from the Dome of the Rock. And if you look at the ceiling, we've got that halo of heavenly light coming in like we saw in the Hagia Sophia, but a lot more extensive use of calligraphy, okay? Calligraphy in the smaller semi-domes that go around. We have here individual prayer mats. If you look at the floor, each space is a place where a congregant can sit, kneel, and pray while an imam goes through the prayers of that day. Again, some images here of the dome, and you can see the ornate quality of it, the gold and the various imagery being used that's common amongst Islamic art. So if we go back to some of our architectural features, the dome goes back to the Parthenon, Pantheon in Rome. If we go to the image of in the green, that is the squinches. They help to essentially bring the weight of the dome down to the piers, which are in yellow. And then we have the decorative features of the marcanas, which again are those stalactite-looking images or decorative features that we saw going back to the Great Mosque of Cordoba, and some of the imagery from various Spanish Islamic pieces of architecture like the Alhambra. And again, don't forget, we have pendentives, we have squinches, which were Byzantine innovations with the Hagia Sophia. We have the Great Mosque of Cordoba here. We have the Great Mosque of Selim II, also known as the Blue Mosque. And you can see some of the similar architectural features there. We have almost that double horseshoe arch. We have the alternating colors. And we're getting closer now to the end of our Islamic art section. So now we're going to take a look at some Islamic manuscripts. So here we have Bahram Gur fights the Karg, all right? And this is ink and watercolor, gold on silver and paper. It's an Iranian manuscript. We have some spatial recession here, indicated by these overlapping patterns. And all right, so we have kind of this decapitated animal that's in the foreground, which is closer to us, which is larger. We see the horse and Bottom Gur behind that. And then even further, we have the lines for the hillside going receding back into the distance. So it represents the ideal king. He wears a crown. He's got a golden halo, which is something that we haven't seen in Islamic art, which is something that they are carrying over from Christian art. We see a little bit of atmospheric perspective because the light bluish background helps to create the idea of depth. And the Karg is this mythical unicorn that he will fight during a trip to India. So again, Bahram Gur is really just an Iranian mythic king that they don't know if he really ever was real, but they believe that he was the one that started one of the ancient Iranian dynasties, which is from the Sasanian dynasty. So the illustration is from the Book of the Kings. Bahram Gur wears the garment that appears to be of European fabric, and then the Chinese landscape conventions can be seen in the background. So because of the Middle East, they've got impacts of art coming from Europe and then art coming from Asia. Now, this piece right here was actually a short answer question about 3 years ago, and this is supposed to be Sultan Muhammad, and it's called the Court of Gayamar, and it is a detail from folio number 20 of the Shah Mahana of Shah Tasmap. And again, this is from Iran as well. And what do we have here? We have, again, this mythical king, all right? And his name was Shah Tahmasp, and he was a patron of the arts. He commissioned a decade-long project to create this book that was eventually 742 pages long of the various Shah Nahama kings, and it was called the Book of the Kings, and it recounts the history of Iran from its creation until its Muslim conquest. Now, what's odd about this is the image itself is off center, and I want you to think about maybe why that is as we go through and talk about the rest of this image. It's very light and ethereal. The king himself almost looks as if he is kind of floating. And you have, animals, if we look at the bottom here, kind of walking up this mythical hillside. We have various descendants and followers of his. Some are kneeling. Some appear to almost be in the heavens. But the story was that all humans and animals became tame before Sultan Muhammad. And it's this very light and ethereal mythical imagery where, it looks like it is watercolor on this gold paper. And, it's off-center to kind of give it that light and ethereal feel. It's kind of very, hippy-dippy-ish. Let me get a little bit closer. Gayamar, again, was the first king of Iran. That's why this is called the Court of Gayamar. These are all his followers. And then if you get a little bit closer there, you see the animals kind of walking up this mythical hill. He ruled from a mountaintop, and humans learned to cook and clothe themselves, and the king is surrounded by light in this golden sky, and the wild beasts would become tame in his presence. So again, a mythical story that is, not really based in truth. You got a little bit closer. You see some deer here. And you got some of, again, the followers kind of almost holding their hand in prayer, looking up at him. You have Gayamar there with a typical Iranian crown of the day. Definitely more realistic looking than the art that we saw in the Byzantine Empire. All right, so now we are on to our final piece in Indian art, the Taj Mahal. And the Taj Mahal, not a mosque, not a pilgrimage site, but a mausoleum for a very important person. Now, if you look, you're like, well, it looks like a mosque. Is that a Mihrab dome? Are those minarets? Looks like it, but that wasn't their function. And again, here we have this nice, long, kind of reflecting pool outside of the Taj Mahal. And this is who it's dedicated for. So it's a mausoleum for Mumtaz Mahal, okay, who's the lady on our left, and it was paid for and created for by her husband, who was on the right, who loved her very much, and she died prematurely. So it was began in 1632, and in about 20,000 people worked on it. During the reign of Shah Jahan, the structure was known simply as the Ralsa, or the tomb. But later, the mausoleum would be called the Taj Mahal, which is a derivative of the woman who it is dedicated to, and her name was Mumtaz Mahal. We have it there. We've got the white stone. As we get closer, you'll see some arabesques and you'll see some calligraphy. So it's translated into English as the Crown Palace. It's made out of marble, precious and semi-precious stones. It's located in India, in one of the far eastern flungs of the world where Islam exists and spread to. Again, named for Mumtaz Mahal. She is the deceased wife of Shah Jahan, and she died while giving birth to the 14th child. She was pretty busy. And it was built to serve as her tomb. It was centrally placed and her tomb is essentially placed under that large dome, and her husband is actually placed next to her. We see there the symmetrical quality. It's on the banks of a river with the reflecting pool going down the central axis, but very balanced, very harmonious. Here you see the stones and the marble a little bit closer. So symmetrical in the harmony of design, the typical Islamic features of one large arch flanked by two smaller arches. We saw that in the imagery of the Great Mosque of Isfahan with the awans. These do look like awans. And again, visitors from all over the world visit here. The grounds represent a vast funerary garden, and the gardens kind of believed to have been found in heaven in the Islamic tradition. And we're going to see these intricate floral design inlays on the facade. The minarets themselves are kind of meant to frame the overall building. And there you can see the calligraphy that goes around the large Iwan entranceway. And this right here is the tomb for his wife and for him. They are still in there. During World War II, it was protected from air raid. They were afraid that it was possibly the Germans or the Japanese may bomb India, so they tried to protect it the best they could, especially if there was going to be bombing in the nearby area because it was a manufacturing area. So they didn't want the rumblings of the bombs drop to shake apart or create cracks in the dome. Here you got just some imagery. You could see the arabesques. Again, even though we are in India, we still have some common Islamic canon of art that is being presently seen. And again, the inspiration for that monstrosity in Atlantic City that no longer exists, the Taj Mahal. I don't think Shah Jahan would be happy that this is what his imagery and building inspired later on. Thank you, guys. This is it for Islamic art. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you followed along. I hope it wasn't too boring for you. But I do plan on creating more of these as we go through our era of art history together and journey into finishing this unit.